Hunters, SkySensei here with another build video. Water and thunder elements, the two cool elements which I feel always get shafted a little bit since we always get more fire and ice weak monsters. Anyway, there are a few monsters which have some good hit zones against thunder, and water is still a little bit rough, but there are a select few. So I have a few sets for you guys in this video. A reminder again that these aren't meta sets because meta is basically Dereliction and Bloodlust. These builds can change depending on your charms, but they are definitely great templates for very efficient builds, and I've tested them to be able to beat elders in less than 14 minutes. So just before we jump in, a quick note, I have a cool new video coming out after this one, and I'm gonna need you guys' help for the one after that, so be sure to subscribe if you want to be a part of it. So with that, let's grab a wire bug and head on out. Now these builds utilize a little less chain crit, and instead I added Mail of Hellfire. If you're curious about full chain crit builds, I have a previous video in which I built fire and ice element builds. You can essentially replace the element jewels in those builds and change the weapon, and they're pretty much good to go for other elements. At level 1, Mail of Hellfire essentially boosts your damage as well, plus 15 raw attack while you're on the red scroll, and plus 5% element on the blue scroll. So depending on the monster you hunt, you can choose whether you need to lean more into raw or into element damage and change your scroll accordingly. So let's start with the water build because there's only one water build in this video. Water element weakness in Rise is in a pretty rough spot in my opinion. There aren't too many monsters that have a huge weakness against water, and even if they do, you have to also consider the raw weaknesses because Glaive is primarily a raw based weapon. There are a few monsters which this aligns sort of well with. Blood Orange Bishatin on his head, Toby Kadachi, Magma Almadron on the head, Anjanath, and both Magnamolos. Overall, I felt because of this, I built a more raw focused water build, with water sort of being the cherry on top. Depending on which monster you hunt and whether the water hit zones, the good water hit zones at least, align with your good raw hit zones, and if that's the parts that you need to break or something like that, whatever your goal is for the hunt, you can alternate which scroll you use to boost either the raw damage or the element damage through the Mail of Hellfire. So the weapon of choice here is the Eventide Kazanagi, the Mizu weapon. A beautiful glaive 320 attack, which is okay, natural purple sharpness, 31 water, and 15% natural affinity. It has decent slots of a level 2 and level 1 with a level 2 rampage slot. Level 14 Kinsect as well, which is great. The other possible glaive that you could use is the Ludroth Tree Glaive, which has a slightly higher raw damage and more water element, but there is no purple sharpness. So after calculating these two glaives out, I found them both to output very similar results. Mizu was always a tad bit higher, but just by very negligible amounts, like 1 to 3 damage points. Ludroth has a chance to overtake the Mizu Glaive on hit zones where raw cut is low but water is high. An example of this would be Tio's Forelegs, 38 raw cut but 25 water. In this situation, the Ludroth would actually overtake the Mizu Blade in damage on a final Tornado Slash. But again, if you shift back to the head, Mizu beats out Ludroth because the raw jumps back to 50 and the purple sharpness kicks it just a bit ahead of the element bonus. So generally speaking, if cut is less than 50 and water is higher than 25, the Ludroth will overtake the Mizu. If you have a monster that fits that situation, switch the blade. Unfortunately for water, there are too many cases where the cut and element modifiers differ too much from body parts to body parts. So TLDR between these two glaives, they output very similar damage. On this build, they're also very exchangeable, and you even get an extra level 1 jewel slot with the Ludroth. But you have lower Kinsect level and your affinity isn't constant with Ludroth, unlike the Mizu. With Ludroth, you would need Kushala Daola's Rampage Jewel to gain back 15% affinity. So some of your attacks won't have as much affinity. So because of that, I chose the Mizu for consistency and extra Kinsect damage. In terms of armor, we have the Kaiser armor, the Archfiend chest, Rathalos gloves, Sinister Magnamalo coils, and the Shagara greaves. My charm is a little bit more elusive charm, not a god charm, but definitely one of the tougher ones to get. I just got it recently last week. Attack 2 with a 3 slot and 2 single slots. If you don't have something like this, you may need to rearrange the jewels or swap a single armor based on which charms you have. Looking at the skills this build has, let's start with the affinity. The blade itself has 15% and critical eye adds another 15%. We have weakness exploit which brings in 50% on raw weak points. Bloodlust is on the legs, which is a unique Magala skill. This skill initially infects you with the Magala virus. While you are infected, your health is gradually reduced, but you gain 15 plus attack, and increased evasion frames. If you hit the monster enough before the virus gauge fills up, you cleanse yourself of the virus, regain all of your red recoverable health, and gain an extra 20% affinity for 1 minute at level 1. So with this skill, we bring the affinity up to 100% for a 1 minute period, which gives you a large window to get some great damage in. Because of this, I utilized Master Touch skill for sharpness retention. During the 1 minute period, if you are efficient at hitting critical points, 80% of your hits will not lose sharpness. During the downtime when you are infected by the virus, 64% of your hits on weak zones will not lose sharpness. So overall, I felt this was a little bit better than Razor Sharp. In terms of attack, we have a level 5 attack. Again, we're going for the higher raw focus damage. Water attack is maxed out though, and critical boost is maxed out for that 1 minute period when your attacks should all be critting on weak zones. Coalescence is also active on this build, which comes from the coils. This provides you extra attack and element attack. Coalescence activates when you are cleared of an ailment, and yes, the Magala virus does count. So every time you cleanse that virus after multiple hits, you gain plus 12 attack and plus 2 element, adding to your 100% crit rate. Chain crit is also on the build from the chest. This skill adds to your raw damage, 5 plus on any initial hit and then 5 plus more after 5 hits. As long as you keep hitting the monster, this buff will not be removed until you stop attacking for 2 seconds. Finally, my charm did have a 3 slot, so I added 1 handicraft jewel alongside my 2 speed sharpen jewels. If you are efficient at the hunt and locking monsters in a certain location, this glaive will still run out of purple sharpness, which is why I added this handicraft to give it a little bit more purple. If you don't have this jewel slot on the charm, it's not the end of the world. If you have a 2 slot, maybe move one of the level 2 decos from the armor onto the charm, since the armor does have a couple of 3 slot decos that you can put this one handicraft. So that's it for the water build. Fairly straightforward, raw focus with water as the cherry on top. Moving on to the thunder builds, I have a few here since there are various monsters weak to thunder, and you may need different options. A reminder again, any of these element builds can be switched around. You can change the weapon to other elements. It may take a rearrangement of a few level 2 jewels, but generally speaking, you can interchange them if you like a certain build over others for your playstyle. So for the thunder builds, I'll be showing you 1 raw focused thunder build, 1 thunder focused build, and then 1 thunder with protective polish. Protective polish is a neat skill which prevents you from losing sharpness for a certain time duration after sharpening. It's a very neat skill, but it doesn't always fit everyone's playstyle, which is why I have alternate options for you. So starting with the raw focused thunder, the glaive we're using is the Furious Rajang Demon Lord Cudgel. 330 attack with a large amount of purple sharpness, low thunder and no affinity, but 2 level 2 jewel slots with a level 14 Kinsec. Definitely a great choice for more raw focus. The armor is the exact same as the previous build: Kaiser Helm, Archfiend Chest, Rathalos Braces, Sinister Coils, and the Shagara Greaves. The charm is the same as well, a bit more of an elusive charm with the 2 attack, a 3 slot, and 2 single slots. Again, if you don't have this, you'll need to reassess which charm is best for you and which jewels you can interchange. For the skills, taking a look at affinity, very similar to most builds, 20% from critical eye. We can fit 1 more critical eye jewel on top of the Kaiser Helm thanks to the weapon slots. Weakness exploit brings us up to 70%, and with Bloodlust we can reach 90% affinity during the 1 minute cleanse period. We also have Chain Crit for extra raw damage, again 5 plus on initial hits and then another 5 after 5 hits. This buff does not get removed until you stop attacking for 2 seconds. Coalescence is also on the build, which grants us 12 plus raw attack and plus 2 element attack once you are cleared of ailments. And that does include the Magala virus, so for that 1 minute period of high affinity, you have boosted damage. Finally, Mail of Hellfire is also on the build, so your red scroll gets boosted raw attack by plus 15, so you should focus your main raw damage skills on that scroll. Thunder attack is also maxed out thanks to the single slot that I have on my charm. If you don't have this slot, again, it's okay. Level 4 is more than enough since this is a more raw focused build. In terms of sharpness, we do have Razor Sharp 3, which is more than enough for this glaive and its amazing purple sharpness. So that's it for the raw focused thunder. Let's take a look at the more thunder focused build. The glaive of choice is the Kezu Surge Chamber, 320 raw and natural white sharpness, but literally triple the thunder damage at 48. No base affinity, but a nice level 3 slot and a single slot and a level 3 rampage slot. In terms of armors, we have the Kaiser Crown, Archfiend Chest, Auroracanth Braces, Sinister Coils, and Shagura Greaves. Now looking at the skills, I will point out that we utilize Critical Element on this build. I am leaning more into the thunder damage, so this build really only works on monsters who have good thunder hit zones above 20 or 25. If they don't have these hit zones, Critical Element really isn't beneficial and you should change the gloves if you still want to use this glaive. I use a level 4 Critical Element on the gloves to max this skill out. Thunder attack is also maxed out, and raw attack boost is just at level 4 with 2 decos on the greaves. The affinity of the build is still relatively good since we have the level 3 rampage slot. We can utilize the Kushala Deora Soul Jewel, which grants 15% affinity after 5 hits on a monster and maintains that affinity until you stop attacking. So that plus the 15% from Crit Eye, 50 from Weakness Exploit, and the final 20 from Bloodlust again brings us to 100% during your cleansed periods from the Magala virus. Because of this, we use Master Touch yet again on this build, and you have to make sure that your charm has a level 2 slot. Crit Boost was slotted into the charm because Crit Element does take up some slots, but if you don't have space for this, it's honestly not as worth because you are focusing more on the Critical Element side rather than just the critical raw damage. This build again does have the Chain Crit and Coalescence just like the previous one. Mail of Hellfire is also on this build, but this build does focus more on elements, so you want to put your main damage skills on the blue scroll this time, since on blue scroll you gain an extra 5% of element damage with Mail of Hellfire. Now the final thunder build that I have here is just an alternative. If you are a gamer who prefers Protective Polish as opposed to Master Touch, which usually does require more precision, this build can be helpful. Disclaimer here, I use the same glaive, but quite honestly, you can use any of the glaives with any element and just change out the element jewels. This build does do better with a 2 single slots on the charm, so it isn't the most charm flexible build. The armor includes the Shigaru Helm, Archfiend Chest, Sinister Gloves, Sailor Skirt, and the Ingot Greaves. There are definitely more options for Protective Polish, but this was a simple change and it worked out pretty well for me. Skills wise, one of the first major changes was that I had to use a hard thunder jewel, a level 3 deco. This was important to make sure that we maintain max element. If you change the weapons in this build for another element, you will have to find a place for this hard element deco, and hopefully your weapon has a 2 slot deco because there are level 3s on the armor itself. You may just need to swap them around. After that, most of the build has the same perks as the previous ones with the change in the coils. The Sailor Skirt comes with a built-in 3 Protective Polish, giving you immediately 90 seconds of sharpness immunity. With my charm and 1 single slot on the legs, I could max out speed sharpening as well, which makes maintaining sharpness in a single area quite comfortable. You do drop a single attack deco for this build, but all in all, maintaining the sharpness goes a long way. So yeah, that's about it for the build hunters. I hope you guys enjoy these and let me know if you try them out or have different builds. I've been loving to see the variety that people are posting in the comments, so be sure to check out the comments for more ideas. I've got another cool video coming up and something I will need everyone's help on very soon, so be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for the next video. Until then, stay safe, be happy, and keep hunting. Sky Sensei is out.